All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome into my channel. My name is CJ Ward. So good to have you here. If you are a regular subscriber to my channel, I'm sure you are expecting to see NASCAR related stuff, as that's usually what I do on this channel is talk about NASCAR. I've got a weekly NASCAR recap show that goes out called The Fifth Turn. But that's not what I wanted to talk about today. Today, I wanted to devote time to discussing one of my other loves, which is Doctor Who. I'm a massive Doctor Who fan, have been for several years. I think 2013-ish is when I got into the show. So I've been a fan for a long, long time. And the last several years, a lot of people, myself included, have unfortunately begun to fall out of love with Doctor Who. There's been just a lot of stuff that just isn't what we're looking for with Doctor Who. There's been a lot of political points being made, which I know is not Doctor Who has never quite shied away from that, but I don't think it's ever been quite as preachy, if I can use that word, as it has been the last several years. We're also coming off of a series 11 where the words Time Lord or Gallifrey or any of those things were not even mentioned once. And that on top of just cruddy writing, there's been a lot of things with Doctor Who over the last several years that just were not great. And it's a shame because it's a show that is universally loved, and you hate hating it, you know. But this year, 2020, we had Series 12, and it was big. It was big. It built off of the mistakes from last year. Not only do we go from a season where the word Time Lord was never said to where now the word Time Lord has almost been redefined, and we've dove deep into the lore of Doctor Who, and with the Series 12 finale, The Timeless Children, that recently aired, there's been a lot of division and a lot of controversy and a lot of people who are up in arms about it because they're saying, oh, Chris Chibnall has single-handedly ruined Doctor Who, and this completely ruins everything that I know. It completely destroys canon, and my goal for this video is not necessarily to get you to like The Timeless Children. Everybody's open to have their own opinions, and if you didn't like it, that's just fine. My goal for this video is I'm going to basically do a quick season recap, go over everything that's gone down. I'm going to do an episode recap and review of The Timeless Children, and then I'm going to go into basically how, in the grand scheme of things, this doesn't really change canon all that much. I've talked to a lot of people who are like, oh, this has completely destroyed everything. And again, I'm not saying that you have to like it, but my goal for this video is to get you to understand that not really all that much has changed. And that regardless of what you think of the episode, again, you're free to have your own opinions about it. That's not my goal here. I just want to help you to see that, first of all, the show's not ruined, and it's going to continue to go on for a long, long time. But also that these twists in The Timeless Children don't really change that much. So that's my goal for this video. Let me go ahead and get us started with a quick recap and rundown of Series 12. All right, so a quick rundown, recap, whatever you want to call it, of Doctor Who Series 12. Overall, I thought this was a brilliant season, especially compared to Series 11, which, at least from what I have heard from people, not very many people actually enjoyed. Again, it was a lot of just a lot of preaching, a lot of just cruddy writing, a lot of not really very much character development. I mean, we're dealing with a TARDIS group of arguably the most useless companions we've had in a long, long time with Ryan and Yaz. I love Graham, and they write him as almost the lead of the entire show, truthfully. But the companions just haven't really been given a whole lot to do. They've usually been our eyes into the world of Doctor Who, and Doctor Who has almost been the story of the companions, aka us, traveling with the Doctor, seeing the universe, and they, I think the companions in this Chibnall Whittaker era have been a little bit wasted, but overall, Series 12 was brilliant, I thought. We started off with Spyfall, parts 1 and 2, which was a brilliant James Bond-esque sort of story. I thought it was one of the biggest, most epic series openers we've had in a long, long time. I loved the story of MI6 having to call in the Doctor, of Daniel Barton wondering where he fits in, the Master, the Kasavin, the reveal at the end of part 2 of trying to take over all of humanity, as every good villain tries to do. I thought it was a brilliant story overall. Loved the suspense. What a cliffhanger after part 1 of the reveal of the Master, and then the plane crashing and all of that. I loved it. Not a perfect episode, but I did love it overall. Really, really fun story. What a brilliant Master reveal of having Sacha Dhawan's incarnation of the Master hidden in plain sight the entire time, as Agent O, only to reveal himself at the end of part 1. Brilliant dynamic between Jodie Whittaker's Doctor and Sacha Dhawan's Master. Anytime those two are on screen together, it's electric, and really a fun time. I loved there were classic references all over the place. The Master's tissue compression eliminator, the references to Logopolis and Jodrell Bank. Loved all of it, and then of course the twist at the end where we see Gallifrey, and the thing is destroyed yet again, like bigger damage than it sustained in the Time War. And it was just such a major shock, and a really big way to kick off the season. Really enjoyed it. But then, unfortunately, we had the travesty that was Orphan 55. In my opinion, it was pretty terrible. It was a story with great potential. The dregs were the monsters in that, were really creepy at first. But Doctor Who over the last several years, I think has consistently had a problem of making the head of the monsters properly terrifying, and then as soon as you pan out to a wide shot and show the full thing, from the neck down, they look pretty terrible. I remember the Fisher King was like that in Series 9 with Under the Lake and Before the Flood. And the dregs were like that as well, where like from the head, if they were lit properly and you just had a quick close-up shot of the head, they were terrifying. And then you panned out to a well-lit full shot, and you're like, oh, these are hokey, these are terrible. But excuse me, I think overall the story had great potential, and just wasn't executed properly. And ending your episode with the Doctor lecturing her companions about how they're not doing anything about global warming destroying the Earth, it just didn't sit well with a large portion of the audience. Regardless of your political views, I don't mind Doctor Who making a political point every once in a while, but there is a certain level of subtlety, and even in the past, there's been times where Doctor Who has tackled political issues in a sci-fi way. Kind of the Twilight Zone would always do that, where it was you knew what they were talking about, but they weren't actually talking about it. They wrapped it up in a sci-fi way, but you at least knew what was trying to be said, and I think Doctor Who could do with that from time to time. But yeah, Orphan 55 I thought was a fairly forgettable episode. Then episode 4 was Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, which I thought was a really just solid story. It was just kind of your good old-fashioned sci-fi adventure through history. I really enjoyed seeing the rivalry between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison, Really enjoyed the performances by those two actors. I thought it was really solid. The monster design was just kind of a rehashing of the Rachnos from the Runaway Bride, but I thought it was a pretty good story, and it was fun to see these monsters like just playing at the dynamic between Tesla and Edison. You know, these aliens not having anything of their own, and they're just constantly stealing things from other creatures. So I thought it was just a really solid story. After that, we had one of the biggest episodes of the year, Fugitive of the Jadoon. Mind blown. I mean, because not only do you have the return of the Jadoon, you have the return of Captain Jack Harkness after, what was it, like 10 years it had been at that point. And his teasing of this new story arc about the lone Cyberman, and don't give it what it wants under any circumstances. And not only do we have all of that, we have the introduction of a new Doctor. It was big and it was mind-boggling. If I take a step back from all of that, the episode as a whole was I mean, it was a good episode, but it wasn't a great episode. I think it will go down in history as one of the greatest, just because they threw so much at you, so much fan service, and especially Captain Jack. It's like, oh yeah, this is gonna be good. But really enjoyable episode there, and this whole dynamic of this new fugitive Doctor, Ruth, played by Joe Martin. Obviously, one of the most exciting things for me about this series was that it brought fan theories back, and the fans actually cared enough as a whole to start speculating about, oh, who is Joe Martin? How could she fit in? Is she pre-Hartnell? Are we officially doing the Series 6B theory, which is what I bought into, which was in between Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee, since we didn't actually technically see that regeneration. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, that people cared enough to bring fan theories back. Big episode with Fugitive of the Jadoon. After that was Praxius, which was another not so great one. Just kind of in my humble opinion, not a really exciting story. I heard one reviewer, you guys should go subscribe to Vote Saxon 07 on YouTube. And in his spoilerific review of this episode, one of the things that they talked about was this episode would have been really good to have those sci-fi elements to it, where it's like you can keep the story overall, but instead of having it be plastic pollution, why don't you twist it and say, oh, the sea devils have gotten a hold of the flood from the waters of Mars, and mesh these two bits of Doctor Who history together and create a real proper threat that the Doctor and the companions have to solve. But I did really enjoy the effect of the Praxius virus overtaking somebody. I thought it looked really scary. I just think it was another episode that wasn't quite executed well. After that, the series was pretty much uphill from there. Can You Hear Me was a really spooky episode with the villain with the fingers. I don't remember his name. I loved the animated sequence in this episode as the two gods were recapping their history. It was very different. It's not something that we usually see in Doctor Who, is an animated sequence like that, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it looked really cool. It was another episode of Doctor Who that did have a lightning fast resolution. And just didn't. It wrapped up so quick, and they captured and trapped the enemies so quickly and so easily. It just left me feeling a bit underwhelmed. I thought it did handle the mental health topic well. It wasn't overly preachy with it, but it also made it a real thing. It didn't, say that's something that I don't think you should have made it sci-fi. I don't think you should have had this science fiction way to explain why people were struggling with mental health. They just said, no, mental health is a thing and the aliens are exploiting it. But I thought they handled it really, really well. After that was the Haunting of Villa Diodati, which was really, really a proper thriller. I really, really enjoyed it. The lone Cyberman Ashad was one of the greatest villains I think in Doctor Who history. I really, really enjoyed him. He was a lot of fun, and it set up the finale really well. Of the whole deal with the lone Cyberman and the Cyberium, and Jack's warning about don't give it what it wants. But the Doctor was kind of in a Kobayashi Maru no way to win situation and had to give it what it wants. And then you realized, okay, we're going to spend the finale wrapping this up and fixing the Doctor's mistake there. So really, really enjoyed that episode. Then we had part 1 of the finale, which was the Ascension of the Cybermen, which was awesome. I loved it. You know, the last couple of Cybermen versus the last couple of humans. I thought what it really did well was it made the Cybermen a real threat again. I think the Cybermen, you know, you've had the Master, you've had the Daleks. I think the Cybermen have gotten almost not silly, but they haven't felt like a real threat in a long time, and they did here. They were not only were they a real threat, but they were terrifying. I love the new Cyberman design, which is parts of new, parts of old. Really, really enjoy this new design. And then, of course, we're starting to set up, okay, with the Master's entrance at the end, we're going to get answers to the Timeless Child mystery and hopefully Joe Martin's Doctor, and we're going to get some answers in the finale. And then, of course, we had the series finale of Series 12, The Timeless Children, and here we go. I thought it was an epic finale to an overall really good series. Like I said, way better than last year. Fan theories are back, and of course, like the Master said, everything you know is about to change. Or is it? So let's go ahead and dive in moment by moment and talk about the Timeless Children. All right, so Doctor Who Series 12, Episode 10, The Timeless Children. Let's go ahead and talk about it. First and foremost, like I hinted at earlier, I just love Sacha Dhawan's Master. He is epic. He is evil. I mean, he is just plain evil. And I think this is something that I know a lot of people have talked about the fact that they don't necessarily enjoy Sacha Dhawan's performance because it undoes Missy's redemption arc at the end of Series 10, which it does, but I'm okay with that. I always thought Missy, while Michelle Gomez played the Master really, really well, I always thought Missy was a little bit too complex of a character. My reason for saying that is the Master has always been your stereotypical, dressed in black, goatee, maniacal laugh, stereotypical baddie. And I thought, while it was a fun, enjoyable storyline to go through that process of trying to make the Master good, I thought it was a little bit too complex for the character. And I'm glad that Chris Chibnall has returned that character of the Master back to his just plain evilness. Another thing that I've noticed is that the companions do have a bit more to do this year. And especially there's been a lot of episodes this year where the companions have split up and everybody's doing something different in a different place. And I really, really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the whole dynamic of the Master making a deal with the Cybermen, and we've seen the Master do this before, not just this year, obviously during Spyfall with the Master making a deal with the Kasavan, but in the past we've seen the Master strike bargains with other enemy races for the sole purpose of teaming up to defeat the Doctor, so or just to do evil. So I enjoyed that. We had Sacha Dhawan deliver one of the most chilling lines of Doctor Who history, which is when he's talking about how he's going to roll out the red carpet for Ashad, and he says, "It's red because it's drenched in the blood of our people." And it was like, whoa! It was dark and it was spooky, but I think it did a good job of showing just how insane and evil this Master is. We had a really touching scene on the cyber ship between Graham and Yaz, of Graham basically telling her, we always think that the Doctor is the greatest person in the world, but Yaz, I think you are. And it was a really nice, really touching scene, but at the same time, I didn't really think it made the most sense because we, the audience, haven't seen that side of Yaz. Arguably, out of these three companions, she's been the most useless. And she really hasn't been given enough to do. And so I just didn't think it quite rung true that Graham was saying, "Oh, you're the greatest person I've ever known." I just don't think we, the audience, have gotten to see that very much. But after that, we had another one of those just kind of chilling moments of having to cut out the human remains from the cybersuit, the Cyberman armor, so that they could sneak inside and hide from Rashad and escape the ship. Which I think we've always known that it's like, oh yeah, there's people inside of those, but phrasing it like that and having to remove the human remains from the armor was just a really really disturbing thought, and I liked having that dynamic played. We have the return of the Matrix, the Time Lord database, which has been mentioned a lot over the last several years. I think Dark Water, Death in Heaven, they talked about it a little bit, and it's come up a couple of times. It's basically just a database of every Time Lord memory, every piece of Time Lord history that has ever existed. It's all in the Matrix. So I enjoyed that making a return. We had a really intense scene of Ashad going through the cyber ships, sort of the tombs of the Cybermen, going through, opening each one of them up and looking for the humans, as Graham and Yaz and the rest of them are inside the armor. You can see Yaz start to cry at one point, and I thought it was a really intense. It was a short scene, but it felt really long because you're on the edge of your seat wondering if he's going to capture them, and then he gets called away. We're diving deep into Gallifreyan lore here again after a series last series where Time Lord was never said, Gallifrey was never said. We didn't talk about anything from the past. We're diving deep into the lore, into the canon here, and we do get some answers into the whole timeless child thing, which was first introduced during episode 2 of series 11, the Ghost Monument, and was hinted at again during Spyfall and all throughout. It's been the series arc of series 12, and we get the answers here. So and I'm going to be basically going through this in the order that it happens in the episode. So I'll be splicing in everything else that's going on. So we learn that the timeless child is a non-Gallifreyan. So we dive deep into Gallifreyan lore. We hear about Tecteun, who is the first of Gallifrey's indigenous race, the Chibogans, to develop space travel. And she goes off, starts having adventures. She comes across some planet where she finds this child, the timeless child, who is a non-Gallifreyan who naturally has the ability to regenerate. So we learn that regeneration is not an ability that is native to Gallifrey. It was native to wherever the planet that the timeless child is from. So that's thing one that we learn about the timeless child. We get a nice payoff to the moment that Ryan had in Spyfall, where he was playing basketball with his friends and he couldn't make the hoop. And we get a nice payoff to that moment as he throws the explosive and nails the shot and destroys the Cybermen. Really enjoyed that. The dynamic between Sacha Dhawan's Master and the lone Cyberman, Ashad, was really fun. I really enjoyed their conversations. We learn about the death particle, which is this thing in Ashad's chest, which is created by the Cyberium. It's basically version 2 of the reality bomb from The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, which basically, when detonated, this thing will destroy all organic life on a planet. And the lone Cyberman monologues and talks about his plan to bring the Cybermen to full automation, full mechanization, which the Master, I loved the moment because the Master said what we were all thinking, where he's like, oh, well, that's just robots. You're just making yourself robots. That's not anything exciting. And I really enjoyed that moment of the Master mocking him. We learn a little bit more about the timeless child. We flash back to that sequence as the Doctor is inside the Matrix with the Master, learning about all of this history. We learn that Tecteun adopts the timeless child, and gets the award for worst mother ever, who is because she's basically experimenting on this child, killing it essentially again and again and again, going through regeneration after regeneration after regeneration, trying to learn the secret, trying to crack the code so that she can understand regeneration for herself. So we get this. Honestly, it's a beautiful shot of like we're moving around the table, seeing the timeless child regenerate and regenerate and regenerate and regenerate. And I really enjoyed that shot. Finally, after all of these regenerations, Tecteun finds it out. She cracks the code, and she decides to splice it into her own DNA and give herself the ability to regenerate. She regenerates, and then we get this beautiful time lapse of the Time Lord Citadel being built. And it's one of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen in Doctor Who. I really, really enjoyed it. And we learn that Tecteun basically helps to build the Time Lords into what they are. She spliced this ability to regenerate into the genetic code of a select few Gallifreyans, specifically the Citadel dwellers, which confirms what we've always sort of suspected, that basically all Time Lords are Gallifreyans, but not all Gallifreyans are Time Lords. Only the Time Lords can regenerate. All Gallifreyans can't. And thus the Time Lords were born, and Tecteun just because put this rule of 13 regenerations in place to restrict the Time Lords. Now, this does raise a question about Gallifreyan lore, because we've always heard that the founding fathers of Gallifrey were Rassilon, Omega, and the Other. Is Tecteun Rassilon? Is she one of the other ones? If she's just someone else, where do Rassilon and Omega and the Other fit in? So it's going to be interesting to see if they do anything with that. I'm kind of wondering if Tecteun does turn out to be Rassilon. That's my theory. But then we get the bombshell revelation from the Master that the Timeless Child is the Doctor. The Timeless Child is the Doctor. And we discovered that the Doctor has this whole past life that she's never known about. Then we flash back to the other story going on, as Ryan and Ethan and Kosharmus are running from the Cybermen, and we get this cool moment of, we think that the Cybermen have won, but then they pull off their helmets and it's Yaz and it's Graham and it's everybody else, and our heroes are all reunited. We get this really interesting scene between the lone Cyberman and the Master, where they talk about the Cyberium, and Ashad makes this comment that it won't leave him while he's still alive. To which the Master says, "Oh, okay," and zaps him and uses the tissue compression eliminator, kills Ashad, and then the Cyberium leaves. Now, a lot of people have said, well, this was they wasted one of the greatest villains ever. I didn't really see it as a waste. I saw it as, holy crap, that's how bad the Master is. If we thought Ashad was bad, you just buckle up, because the Master's about to take us on a ride. I really, really appreciated that moment. I thought it was cool. And then there was this really odd moment where the Master's kind of leaning over the little figure, the little shrunken lone Cyberman, and he has this moment where he said, "Oh, I thought if I shrunk you, then the death particle would go off and we'd all be dead, and I would be okay with that." And it's this really dark moment showing like he really hates his own existence. He doesn't want to go on anymore. And then, of course, we snap right back into the humor of, he's like, "Oh, I should have said somebody should cut you down to size and then zapped you. Oh, I'll use it next time." And ha ha ha. And, Master runs off laughing again. But then the Master decides to take the Cyberium into himself. And of course the Cyberium is like the strategy center of the Cybermen, and he is the host of it now. We flash back into the Matrix, and we have this really good scene up on a mountaintop between the Doctor and the Master, where, again, we're talking about how the Doctor has had countless lives before William Hartnell's first Doctor, and I'll go more into what that means a little bit later. But I think the biggest takeaway from this scene is a quote from the Master where the Doctor is talking about, I remember my childhood and growing up with you and the academy and all of that. And the Master says, that happened. It just wasn't your first life. And this is what I want to say to everybody watching this video who's wondering, well, isn't all of Canon destroyed? No, nothing. And I repeat, nothing from the last almost 60 years of Doctor Who has changed even remotely. Everything that has happened from William Hartnell to Jodie Whittaker still happened. Nothing has changed there. Nothing has been nothing has been negated, nothing has been eliminated, nothing has been changed. The only thing that's happened is we've added a whole nother past before that. That's all we've done here. So I do want to make that distinction. I think that's the biggest takeaway from that scene. We get this moment where the Master explains why he's so angry about this whole revelation and why he went through the trouble of destroying Gallifrey. And he says, I'm angry because there's a little piece of the Doctor in him. Everything that he is somehow because of her. And he can't bear that because the Doctor is now the foundation of Time Lord society. And the ability to regenerate comes from her. And she and Tecteun created the entire existence of the Time Lords. And I've heard some speculation about this as well. It makes sense to me because he's completely insane and he that revelation of his biggest enemy being the foundation of everything that he is, that would set him off. But also, I have to realize I'm also an actor, and actors have to think about motivation and objective and having strong motivations for everything that you do. I think it would have been an even stronger motivation, an even better choice for them to go with the show if the Timeless Child had been the Master, because then, okay, now you understand why he would go so far as genocide on the entire planet, because he has been violated. And he himself has been experimented on and lied to and all of that. That would have made even more sense. But I totally get the way that they have done it. I get that this would have made him so angry. I just think it would have been a stronger motivation if it had been him. We get a great moment. Really a good piece of acting from Jodie Whittaker as she's asking the Master to show her the rest of it. And he refuses, and then she shoves him down to the ground and says, show me the rest. Honestly, Jodie Whittaker's Doctor this year, we say sometimes that every Doctor is a combination of two or three others. She's really a combination of David Tennant and Sylvester McCoy. She and David Tennant are really good friends, and there is a lot of similarities between how those two actors play the role, but she's also got that dark moodiness that Sylvester McCoy's Doctor had, and I really enjoy it. We get the further revelation that the Doctor is part of the Division, which is this Time Lord secret police that can interfere with the affairs of other planets. And then everything from that point on has been redacted and removed from the database of the Matrix. Everything else is gone. There's nothing else to be seen in the Matrix files. But we do finally get an answer to who or what Brendan is. Those Ireland flashbacks we were getting in Ascension of the Cybermen, we finally get an answer for that. Essentially, Brendan is a cover-up memory that was placed in the Matrix to mirror yet hide what happened to the Doctor / the Timeless Child. The Master has this comment that says it was possibly the last gift of a parent left by Tecteun as a clue to the Doctor of what really happened. We learn that when the Master killed everybody on Gallifrey, he kept the bodies and created a new race of Cybermen out of the bodies of old Time Lords. He calls them Cybermasters, and literally, it's while they with their Gallifreyan type heads looked awesomely stupid. The pure concept of an endlessly regenerating Cyberman is terrifying. It's properly terrifying. And I thought it was the concept alone is really, really good. We had a nice callback to the end of time as the Master and all of the Cybermen start chanting for Gallifrey, for the Time Lords, for the end of the universe itself. Obviously echoing Rassilon's chant at the end of time, for Gallifrey, for victory, for the end of time itself, which was a nice little callback there. The companions enter in through the boundary. They come to Gallifrey. The companions, all the humans from Ascension of the Cybermen, and Kosharmus, they all decide, okay, we're gonna go save the Doctor and help to defeat the Cybermen and all of that. The Doctor is still in the Matrix, and Ruth appears, the fugitive Doctor from Fugitive of the Jadoon, basically those two Doctors have a nice little moment talking about Jodie Whittaker is bemoaning everything that she's now learned and talking about how she feels like she doesn't know herself because what she knows is not compatible with this new information. And Ruth's Doctor has a very good line where she says, "Have you ever been limited by who you were before?" Which I thought was a really nice little moment. And the Doctor's like, "Oh, that does sound like me talking." Because every time that the Doctor has learned something new about himself or herself, or had a new revelation, we're always dealing with the same character, and no amount of new revelation is ever going to change who the Doctor is now. And I really, really enjoyed that moment. Ruth gets the Doctor to blow the Matrix by trying to overload it with all of the memories of her past. And we finally, with the Doctor Who theme playing over top, we finally get an I Am the Doctor moment and a montage with all the past Doctors that we've gotten for a lot of the Doctors previously. That hello, I'm the Doctor moment from Matt Smith where he walks through David Tennant's face. We got that moment finally with Jodie Whittaker of exploding the Matrix and flashing through Peter Capaldi, Matt Smith, David Tennant, Christopher Eccleston, John Hurt, Paul McGann, Sylvester McCoy, Colin Baker, Peter Davison, Tom Baker, John Pertwee, Patrick Troughton, William Hartnell, the Morbius Doctors, and Ruth. We finally get a payoff to the Brain of Morbius from the Tom Baker era, where we were shown a little montage like that. We saw Tom Baker, John Pertwee, Patrick Troughton, William Hartnell, and then 8 other faces. And so it's also this whole idea of there being, and I'll dive into this later, this whole idea of William Hartnell not being the first Doctor is not a new idea. This was hinted at back in the 70s during the Brain of Morbius, where the intention was always to say that there were Doctors before William Hartnell and that he wasn't actually the first, which makes sense, truthfully. If we're dealing with a several thousand-year-old alien who regenerates, who are we to say that William Hartnell ever was? For all we knew, that's just where we, the audience, picked up the story. We have no idea. We had no idea what happened before an unearthly child. And so we had no way of knowing for sure that he was the first Doctor. And I'll dive into that more in a few minutes. But we finally get a payoff to the Morbius Doctors, and I really, really enjoyed that. When the Doctor wakes up, she has a nice little moment where she says, "We're all clever, all of us, however many that is," where she finally, she accepts this new past that she's learned about, and accepts the fact that, she has all of these past lives. She remembers something that Ashad said that's been bothering her, where Ashad had said, "The death of everything is within me." This clues her into the death particle. They find the shrunken Ashad figure. contact returns again, where the doctor telepathically contacts the master. The doctor and the companions hatch this plan to rig up all these explosives to destroy the cyber ship. But it triggers too soon, and everybody's just barely able to get off the ship and into the Citadel before the ship explodes. The doctor, basically, we do another parting of the ways type thing, where the doctor basically gets all the companions to escape in another TARDIS, because she's gonna stay behind. She straps Ashad to another explosive, and she basically decides, I'm gonna sacrifice myself. I'm gonna use the death particle on Gallifrey to wipe out the Master and these new Cybermasters. And again, we get another parting of the ways callback. That moment where Christopher Eccleston's hologram looks directly at Rose and says, "Live a good life." We get another moment like that where just before she leaves the TARDIS, Jodie Whittaker's doctor says, "Live great lives," and then she sends them home. The Sacha Dhawan's performance as the Master is actually quite layered. He's just unadulteratedly evil, but he's also a little bit scared and cowardly, and there's a lot of layers to peel back in his performance. I really, really enjoy it. The doctor gives a great speech about accepting her past and saying, "Oh, you're trying to scare me with all of this because you're scared of everything, but I've learned now that I contain more than I've ever thought possible." And she finally accepts it and threatens to use this explosive and the death particle and wipe everybody out. And just as she's about to do it, the Master has this brilliant line where he says, "Become death, become me," almost as the end of time, where he's egging her on to do it and to destroy him. Great acting from Jodie Whittaker here in this moment. And when he says, "Become me," that's when she lowers the explosive. She can't get herself to do it. And out of nowhere, in comes Kosharmas. Now, I've always thought there was more to him than meets the eye. And I wondered if he was a Time Lord or just, I wondered how he fit in. And we finally get the answer. Because remember in Fugitive of the Jadoon, where Jack says, "Oh, there was this group of I think they may have been time agents, I can't remember. This group that sent the Cyberium back through time." Well, Kosharmas was part of that group. And he basically tells the doctor, "No, you said you started this with Percy Shelley and the Cyberium. You didn't. I started this. I was part of the team that sent this back, so this is my responsibility. Now run." And so he takes the explosive away from her. The doctor escapes in another TARDIS, right as he's about to get killed by the Cybermen, he uses it. And right before the thing explodes, you hear the Master say, "All of you through here now." So, of course, he escaped. He's the Master. He always does. And Gallifrey is destroyed again. This is twice in one series. First, the Master wipes it out, and then Kosharmas literally destroys it. The companion TARDIS lands back in 21st century England, disguised as a house, because obviously the chameleon circuit works. So this one is disguised as a house, and everyone's back safe on Earth. The TARDIS that the Doctor was in lands on the planet that they were in Ascension of the Cybermen, lands on that planet disguised as a tree, and she walks over and finds her TARDIS standing there, walks back into the TARDIS, and this was basically a David Tennant series finale ending, where you get the Doctor standing alone in the TARDIS looking sad, and then bang, the Jadoon appear out of nowhere. They just teleport into the TARDIS. They arrest the fugitive, which is the Doctor, and she gets zapped into some prison cell on an asteroid out in outer space. And we get another David Tennant style, what? And that's it. And that's the end of the episode. That's the end of series 12. And we get the title screen that says, "The Doctor will return in Revolution of the Daleks," which is going to be either a Christmas special or a New Year's special. They're not quite sure yet. But so that is a moment-by-moment recap of the Timeless Children. At this point, I'm going to dive into a little bit of what does this actually change, what stays the same, any theories I have, and then concluding thoughts. So let's go ahead and dive into that. All right, so the Timeless Children and the revelations that it brings. what does this actually change about Doctor Who? What does it change about the canon, the lore, the Doctor herself? What does this actually change? Well, contrary to popular belief, not all that much. Only two things have been affected. The Doctor is no longer Gallifreyan. That's number one. That's probably the biggest thing that this actually changes, is that the Doctor is no longer actually from Gallifrey. Also, this establishes that William Hartnell is no longer the first Doctor, and had countless lives before that version, which again is not a new idea. It's been hinted at in the past, but fully established here. Really, that's it. That's the only two things that this really changes, is that the Doctor's no longer from Gallifrey and William Hartnell is no longer his first life. So what stays the same? Well, the Doctor's still a Time Lord. The Doctor is not from Gallifrey, but she's still a Time Lord. And in fact, she's the entire foundation of the Time Lord. She's the very first Time Lord, you could say. What else is the same? Well, basically everything that we've ever known about Gallifrey after this, Gallifrey's history that we've known is fully intact. And then arguably most importantly, the entirety of the Doctor's life that we have seen still stands. Again, like I said earlier, every single thing that has happened from William Hartnell in 1963 to Jodie Whittaker in 2020, and everything in between, everything that has happened between those two Doctors still happened. Again, like the Master says, all of that happened. It just wasn't your first life. And that is the biggest takeaway that I want to give to people, is nothing has really changed. It's only been added to. Nothing from the last 50 years has even been touched. And it's kind of the brilliant thing that Chris Chibnall has been able to do. Nothing has been touched. They've only just added a whole new past. Do I have any theories about what could happen going forward? Well, a possibility is that the Master could still be lying. One thing that dawned on me, I've seen this episode now 4 times, and one thing that I realized upon my last viewing was that actually nothing that we saw in The Matrix says that the Timeless Child is the Doctor. We only have the word of the Master for that. He's the only one who says it, because the Matrix shuts down, or we get to the redacted portion, and then the Master just says, "Oh, the Timeless Child is you." Nothing in the Matrix actually says that, so it's possible that he could be lying about it. I don't think he is. It's just a possibility. I fully believe that the Timeless Child is the Doctor, because I think it works and it makes sense across the board. Another possible theory, this is really where this one comes from, is one of the first Timeless Child scenes that we get is when she falls off the cliff. She's playing with a friend. She's kind of roughhousing with a friend. She falls off the cliff because they're doing a bit of tug-of-war with a little toy spaceship. So what if there are 2 timeless children and the other one is the Master? And again, this goes back to, I think, that stronger motivation where, what if the Timeless Child was the Master? Now you understand why he would go through the trouble of committing mass genocide on Gallifrey. Is what if he's a Timeless Child as well? And again, really where this sparks from is the fact that there's another little child that the Timeless Child is playing with when she falls off the cliff. That is a possibility, and there's nothing to say that the Master couldn't have tampered with what we saw in the Matrix. That's a possibility. I don't think that's the direction they're going to take it, but it is a possibility. Regardless, there's so much new potential with this show. There's so many more story possibilities, so many more ways you could take the show. So many new doors have been opened up for the future of Doctor Who with this storyline, which leads into my big conclusions. I'm so excited for the future of Doctor Who. Like I said in the beginning, I had kind of fallen out of love with this show. I'm fully back into it now. I'm so excited for the future. There's so much potential. In my opinion, the show kind of needed this. It almost feels like a soft reboot, not a total redo of everything, but just enough rejuvenation to spark interest again. Truthfully, I've always thought the 13 regeneration rule needed to go. There's a lot of those concrete rules that have been established, which truthfully were created for the sole purpose of continuing to progress the show. But a lot of those concrete rules can become restrictive if you leave them alone, like the 13 regeneration rule. Truthfully, I mean, originally, the way that it was originally written, the Doctor was a human from the future who built the TARDIS himself. Things change. And if nothing ever changed in Doctor Who, then the show would have ended in 1966 when William Hartnell got too sick to continue acting. So things need to change. Things are flexible in Doctor Who, and they're supposed to be that way. The show has always ignored some of its own rules or some of its own established canon or changed things when they became inconvenient. The show's always done that. That's nothing new. And again, like I talked about, the biggest takeaway is that nothing has changed. Everything from the last almost 60 years is perfectly intact. The only thing that's happened is new things have been added before any of that. None of what has been added is new. It's really just filling old plot holes, like the Brain of Morbius, like Remembrance of the Daleks, when I think there's an offhand remark about the Doctor saying, oh, I remember when we tested the Hand of Omega, which is some ancient Gallifreyan weapon. So really, they've just filled old plot holes. There's nothing really brand new that has been established in The Timeless Children. And like I said in the beginning, if you didn't like it, that's fine. And I'm not here to change your opinion about whether or not you liked the episode. Really, what I'm just here to do is to help you to realize the show's unscathed. Nothing has been changed. Nothing has been ruined. Nothing has been destroyed. And truthfully, the next showrunner may come along and change it all again anyway. But Chris Chibnall managed to do something brilliant, in my opinion, which is change everything without damaging anything. He's changed everything in the sense of opening up our eyes to this entire new past and history, to the Doctor and the Time Lords and Gallifrey, without changing or disrupting anything in the show's established past. I think it's brilliant. I think it's the rejuvenation the show needed, and I think it adds a new level of mystery and suspense to not just the character of the Doctor, but the show of Doctor Who overall. So I really, really enjoyed The Timeless Children. I really, really enjoyed Series 12 overall. Let me know you guys' thoughts about the series overall, the episode, anything that I've talked about in the comments below. I want to hear about it, and I'm excited to hear what you guys thought. So that's pretty much going to do it for me. I just wanted to make this video and talk about what's changed, what hasn't, and help people to see that the show is going to be just fine after this. So that's pretty much going to do it for me. Thank you guys for watching this video. Share it with your friends if you found it enjoyable or found it helpful to understand what happened in The Timeless Children. Yeah, that's going to do it for me. So take care. I will see you guys later.